Hi, I'm Delorianne and I'm with Coastal Magic and I'm here with our featured bloggers. We're going to be talking a little bit of what they review, what they read, and also give some tips if you yourself are out there looking to review. These are the ladies that are going to be moderating our panels at Coastal Magic, so you'll be seeing them all through the weekend. And we're gonna go around in a circle and they're gonna introduce themselves and then we're gonna get to chatting.
Hi, I am Jen Twimom. I have the blog That's What I'm Talking About, which actually will be 13 years old this Saturday. I have my reading tastes have changed over the last 13 years tremendously, but currently I review mostly romance, contemporary, small town rom-com, historical romance, sci-fi, fantasy, cozy paranormals, cozy mysteries, historical mysteries, pretty much all, like a lot of stuff. So we cover it all on the blog.
Hi, my name is Laura. I had the blog Little Red Riding Hood for almost a decade. I have switched to copy editing, so I don't actively review anymore because it is a conflict of interest. But like I said, I did it for almost a decade, so I know a couple of things still every once in a while.
Hi, my name is Jay. I run an LGBTQ romance review blog called Joyfully Jay. We are about 11 and a half years old. I want to say we're right now at 8 reviewers who review for me on the blog, and we cover all genres of romance under that LGBTQ umbrella. So contemporary, historical, paranormal, all of that. We also often will do other fiction or nonfiction that sort of connect to LGBTQ stories.
And Crystal and Amber, you review together. Who wants to go first?
Okay, yeah. So I guess I'm Crystal.
I'm Amber.
And we're sisters reviewing books on Instagram is where we do all of our stuff. We have done some guest blogging for Funkin' Fiction blog as well. And we're about
I was trying to add the months.
2 years old. We started doing this after our first virtual Coastal Magic. Reading is what brought Amber and I closer as we, got older and got further apart from each other. And so I thought it would be something fun for us to do. And so
Yep,
we review everything. But I wrote down that we do a lot of Coastal Magic right now because that's pretty much where we kind of started, and we really love those authors, and so we want to make sure to give them.
And we participate in the reading challenge, and there's like 60 or 70 authors, so they keep us pretty busy. So whatever Coastal Magic is reading.
Nice. Awesome. So the next section is what reviews mean. What do they mean to you? Why did you start reviewing? And what do you think it means to the authors that you guys review?
I started reviewing because I didn't have anybody in my real life to talk about books with, and found that there was a whole wide community out there of people that I could just totally fangirl over these books and these authors about, and have made some really fantastic friends doing it. So that's why I started reviewing.
I think I started mostly because I have an opinion on everything and I wanted to share it. And I started off reading a lot of romance review blogs and eventually reached the point where I realized that just commenting on other people's blogs wasn't giving me a chance to really talk about and share my thoughts on books as much as I wanted. So that's sort of what got me started. The second half of your question about, what do you think that reviews mean? I mean, for me, I think it was a chance to both share my excitement about books. And I think that maybe twist a little bit on what you said in terms of what they mean for authors. I think that everybody will agree, and I'm sure others can speak to, reviews. I think any review, good or bad, can help a book and can bring someone's attention to a book because You know, one person might love something about a book that somebody else hates and vice versa. And I truly believe no matter what the review is, there's a reader out there for every book. But I do think that the slant that we take on my blog is reviewing for the readers. And our goal is to help readers who have, you know, everyone has a budget, whether it's big or small, for what they can spend on their books. And our goal is to help you decide if this is a book for you, not if it's good or bad, but if this book appeals to you, whether I hate it or not, I'm still thrilled if you love it. So my goal is to reach out to those readers and help them figure out whether a book is going to be something that they're going to like and is worth picking up.
I love
That's
that.
a great point.
I love that.
I definitely, so I like what Laura said and what Jay said, I mean, I started reviewing books. I was never a book reviewer, and I want to stress that I am not a literary critic. And what happened is I was on that Bird app that, you know, back 12, 13, 14 years ago was a really cool place to be. And there were lots of authors and other reviewers. It was a great community, and everybody was starting their own blog. And I was like, okay, I'll start a blog. And then I didn't write reviews at first. And then I wrote something. I had actually read a book that really touched me, and I wrote the author, and the author wrote back to me and said, wow, your email came at such a great time. I had really hit a low, and that meant so much to me. So I kind of took that letter and I put it on my blog, and people were like, oh, that's a great review. And I was like, wait, that's a review? And it just kind of evolved from there. And, you know, at first it was kind of like, oh, you know, get my name out there. But now it's, I review for myself, and I review for people who want to talk about books, and I want to share my thoughts. And like what, you know, like I didn't think of it that way, but exactly what Jay said, like I might not like a book, but that's why it's important to say why I didn't. I know a lot of people, I might say, I mean, I would never say it like, oh, there's too much sex in a book, you know, because but you know what I mean? Like then
It's
someone would
relative.
say, that's why I want to read it. And I've heard that from people before. So as long as you tell like why you like a book or why you didn't like a book, that can help someone else make a decision if they want to read the book. And again, same with the author thing. I've been told by going to many conferences and meeting many authors, the majority of the authors just want their book talked about, because the more people talk about their books, the more likely is someone's going to pick it up, read it, and buy it. And so the same kind of thing, I think just talking about books is helpful to authors and publishers and things like that.
So I feel like I started reviewing mainly because of Coastal Magic. Before that, I hadn't really thought too much other than, you know, it was just on Goodreads, and it just a, you know, 5-star something. I hadn't really reviewed it. And then through Coastal Magic and a lot of that like personal interaction, I found myself wanting to review and really try to get the word out to authors that, you know, I had these conversations with and these connections with, and I would read their books, and you get so much depth from it. And I really wanted to like promote them and try to get as many people to read, because a lot of people are self-publishing and things are expensive. So whatever I could do to like help their books, because they're just amazing, and I want as many people to try to read them as possible.
A lot of what all of you said is true, especially just in the general Goodreads putting out the reviews. I just want to make sure I mean, I read them all the time where I'm like, you give that 2 stars and you said a lot of good things. Like I wanted to make sure there was another one out there, you know, saying some good things. And so if somebody read it, they could help make that decision for them about why I liked it. And then as Amber said, exactly the same reason for me, as I got to know a lot of these authors, I started realizing that there's so many books out there. And if you're out in the world, you see the same ones, you know, the ones that are, you know, front and center at Barnes and Noble, the ones that are front and center. And I was like, I just want to be another voice, another one placing something out there that someone may never have stumbled upon, because we would not have we not come to Coastal Magic, probably read 90%, 95% of what we've read. And so I just wanted to be that, you know, these authors are great, like their books are great, these stories are great, and just wanted to be another voice out there. So that's why we started on Instagram, because then it can highlight, you know, some of those great books by those authors and be another visual that somebody is seeing of, hey, I've never even heard of that author, like maybe I want to check that book out. So pretty much of all of you've said.
I don't know if you quite mentioned it, but you touched about like the stars and, you know, the benefits of stars versus a review. I think like most review sites that aren't personal blogs, but like Goodreads or the retail sites want you to put like a rating, a star rating in there. Usually it's out of 5. And I think that's important because it draws people in. But if you, like you mentioned, if there's a 5-star review and they don't say what they liked about it, then I'm thinking, you know, am I going to like this? You know, why is it 5 stars? And so I feel like you have to justify the rating with something. It doesn't have to be paragraphs long, but just letting us know, like, it's 5 stars and I loved it. This is why. Or it was 2 stars. This was what was good, but this is what turned me off. And so they are really tied together, both equally important.
Right. And I know with the challenge for the readers to collect points, you know, for the review that they turned in for that book to claim their points, it's 3 sentences. I liked it. I liked it because the characters felt real to me. I liked it because this character has something that I can relate to, XYZ. It doesn't have to be like Jen said, it doesn't have to be a dissertation 5 pages long with, you know, it's how do you feel about it? Did it make you happy?
When I was reviewing when I still had the blog, I would try to keep my reviews to a maximum of 3 paragraphs because as a reader, when I'm reading reviews and they're longer than that, I would just skim them. So I tried to write the reviews for me that I would read.
Yeah.
You know, 3 paragraphs, maybe 5 sentences a paragraph. And I know Jen writes really thoughtful and well thought out and in-depth reviews, and those are fantastic.
I can't
and I think
do short reviews.
There's a place for both of them.
Yeah, I agree completely.
So
yeah,
write a 3-sentence review that says, I liked it. I really didn't like the ending, but the main character, you know, made up for it on this twist that I'm not going to tell you about.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
I feel like on Goodreads, I will start with reading the shorter ones when I'm deciding whether or not I'm going to read something, because I'm looking for just those keywords of what I might like in it. You know, the suspense was great. I like the romance. And then when I get finished with it, that's when I'll spend that time reading those longer reviews and to really see like what that person thought, you know, more in depth, so that things aren't spoiled, you know,
Well, so with doing Instagram as another, you know, medium, and I know this is going to come up, but I found it absolutely challenging to try to take and make a graphic that sort of captures what would pull somebody in, whether it's, you know, a sentence about the characters or the setting, or just, you know, like the images you see where you put a bunch of little words of some of the things they may see in there. And it's a challenge sometimes because, you know, it's easy to write, you know, a couple of sentences or a couple, but to really summarize it in that kind of selling, you know, like an advertisement, and
a little snapshot.
It's kind of fun, you know, like trying to figure out how
cool.
How can you say that? And I mean, I know I made a little like tagline one time. I've had an author reach out and go, I love that, I'm stealing it. Like for
That's awesome.
So it's a challenge and it's fun, and you just want to give those things that might pull somebody in, you know, just really quickly, like, oh, it's got talking cats, I'm in. Like sometimes you gotta tell me, okay.
That's funny because I'm reading a book right now that has a talking cat, so I have to laugh at that.
Oh, what book is it? We need to go add it to Goodreads. That's all we need.
I think that like a lot of this comes back to what Jen was saying, which is really whether you love a book or don't love a book, the bottom line is being able to explain what you liked and what you didn't like so that somebody else can come behind and follow. So, you know, whether you're writing that in bullet points or in visual form or in, you know, paragraphs, I think it really all comes down to giving a reason. And I do agree with you with the ratings and the review. I mean, I think that having just purely a rating can be a helpful visual really quickly, you know, if you to give sort of direct you where you want to go. But if you're looking at 500 books, what you really need to understand is, well, why did they give it 5 stars? I mean, I think as important ratings are, and I do think they're really important. And honestly, authors I hear over and over again really want a star rating because that's something that is helpful for others. I think that along with that, being able to explain for bad what you thought of the book in a way that other people can then pick up and say, yep, this is for me, or no, it's not, makes a big difference.
Right. The star ratings for like Amazon and Goodreads, that's great for algorithm. It's going to push it up. But if you can accompany that with bullet points, a sentence or two, a paragraph or two, then it gives a bigger impact, I think.
I know authors a lot of time will say, even if you just write, I liked it. I would read the next one. Anything is better than, not writing a review at all.
I also think there's probably a difference between what, for an author, what they want for their promo may
Right.
not be the same as what a reader would want. And
Right.
I think it comes back to who your target is and what your goal is. And if it's, sort of supporting authors and getting the word out and spreading, then what you're doing for them may be different than if your goal is to tell readers about a book. And you know what I mean? It's, I do think that you're right, though. I do think that for a lot of authors, all they want is something there. And so I think especially if you're just starting out, just getting something out there can be great. So people who are thinking about doing this, like, don't feel like it has to be this extensive review. But I do think that for readers, it can be more helpful to, even if you're just giving some bullet points, great characters, too much sex, whatever your things are, getting them out there so that people know what to pick from.
Yeah, because it can be like, my favorite is like, oh, the guy was way too alpha. Like, and I'm like, well, under the right circumstances, I like a nice alpha male.
One person's
So what is
trash,
it?
one person's treasure. I mean,
Right?
that's
Are we
really what
talking
it is.
shifters? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm in. So those are helpful, even if it's, maybe a negative, and to the author, it's a positive to me as a reader, because then I know, oh, I'm gonna like this.
Helps you figure out what you want.
Right. The world building was way too weird. Oh, well, you've piqued my interest.
Right.
What is that?
That's exactly it. I think that's exactly it.
So the next section is going to be a show of hands. It's going to be a rapid round. And then afterwards, we're going to delve into why this is the way you do things. So the first thing is a show of hands, please. Who takes notes as you read or listen, however you're consuming?
Bristol's
It's sort of like
obsessive with it.
halfway.
So we've got 2.5. Okay. Who makes
I'm a very much yes.
I think Jen takes notes.
who makes notes or bullet points afterwards? Like after you finish the book, you sit down and make some bullet points and notes. Okay, so that looks like another 2.5. Okay. Who has a preset list of questions before you even start the book? Who has a preset list of questions or a format that you try to read for? Is that a half or is that a full one?
I'll explain on that later. Yeah.
Okay. Who does an emotional outpouring? Like no format, just word vomit.
Oh, I will do that, especially if it was
Are
a
you
good
talking
book.
about, I wasn't sure what you meant by this. Do you mean like when you're done reading it, like, or is this like your review? It's just an emotional outpouring.
In your review, do you just like write it cold? You just whatever emotional outpouring?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got, I think Crystal's counts as 2 over there. So that looks like 3 with your hand up, Amber. Yep. Okay, so that is 2, 3.
Everybody but me.
Sort of there, yeah.
Okay. The next one. Who writes their review immediately after they finish the book?
Sometimes.
Within the first hour. After
If it's really,
no,
really
no.
good.
I'd say within the first day.
Yeah, first day.
Within the first day? Okay, that counts.
It
So what is that?
depends if I have a deadline. If I finish a book and the review has to be posted tomorrow, then yes.
Right.
So, and or if it's something like it's really on my mind, but
Yeah.
I'd say the percentage of books that get the review written in the first day is probably 10%, if that.
Okay.
If it's really exciting, I will just have to talk about it some more. So relive it in a review.
Who waits to write their review to see what has stuck with you? Couple days, a week?
My answer is for
So-
all of these because it just depends on my mood.
Yeah.
And I feel like Crystal and I have each other, so a lot of times we will just talking to each other and we're like, oh yeah, you remember this, and then all of a sudden it responds the whole review because now we need to make room for another section.
And I just wait because I'm lazy. And it's not because what sticks to me, because I have written notes. and so it's not so much like I'm pondering it for days. It's just, with my schedule, it's like, okay, today's the day I'm going to write reviews. And I actually do, well, we're not explaining, but I actually do better when I have more than one review to write, because then I get like in a flow and then I do it. So
Gotcha. Let's see. Okay, so that was, oh, wait a minute. The last one is, who uses Bookstagram or Book Talk in your reviews? So that's 2.
Well, it's really just one because Crystal does it. I just, okay,
Emotional
I'll join
support.
I'll
Emotional
join the
support.
video. I'm here. Let's talk.
Okay, so is there any other pre-writing habits that anybody has that they want to share? And then we will circle around to answer any of your hand raises.
I highlight a little in my Kindle as I go, but I will tell you 95% of the time I never end up looking back at it because I try to write within the day and I try to write one review before I start the next book. Doesn't always happen, depending on my schedule, but I like to like sort of purge it out and then move on rather than having it linger there and get. The exception is I do listen to audio and read at the same time, but I try not to have multiple books going at once until I've written the reviews.
Okay. Does anybody have any of those hand raises that they want to talk about? Why you do that thing?
I was just going to say that I do read blurbs sometimes before because I always need to kind of double check any spoilers that I might, anything like, oh, did they mention that? So I can say
Yes,
that.
definitely. I do.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I always
Yes.
reread it after just to make sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's a good point.
I don't read the blurb before the book because I like going in completely blind.
Yeah, we do
Unless
that a
like
lot.
unless it's an author that I don't know and I'm trying to decide on a book. But then before I write the review or as I'm writing the review, I do read the blurb for that exact same reason, just to see like, especially if there's something like, ooh, would you consider this a spoiler?
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
I mean,
if they put it in the
if
blurb,
they
it's
put it in
their
the
game.
blurb, it's not a
Yeah.
spoiler.
And if
Right.
it's not in the blurb, just avoid it because what people take as spoilers is like crazy in my book sometimes. So when in doubt, just don't mention it.
We have a spoiler
would-
tag on our posts, so if we have anything that looks dicey, we'll put it behind a spoiler tag.
Anything that's in like the first 5 or 10 pages
Yeah.
was at least in my mind not a spoiler. Like if
I
you
I
could
agree.
open it up,
Even if a
and-
big bomb is dropped, it's
Right.
like, okay, it's in the first page. I mean, like,
Right,
how
right.
can that be a spoiler?
Yes, I agree
Right.
with you. The early parts of the book, I think, are fair game.
yeah.
Okay, Jen, you had something you wanted to say about your notes.
I'm a prolific note taker. And it's become such a part of my reading process, not even my review process. And I read a lot of series. So it's great because especially if a book doesn't come out for a year or 2 years, I can go back because it's a lot of times you write a review, but like you don't put the spoilers in there. You don't
Right,
put all the
right.
plot details in there. So, so my notes are a combination of plot details and then thoughts. Like I like, oh, this scene really touched me. This is why, or, oh my God, I'm crying here. And this is why, or, oh, I am so freaking mad right now because this character did this. And this is so not what, out of character. Like, so the emotional outpouring that goes into my notes. And then that gives me the capability most times that I can go back and write the review within a week. I don't usually go more than a week, but it's so funny because I have a friend, book nympho, Jennifer, she then started reviewing with me and she's now retired, but she would email me and she'd be like, okay, can you send me the notes for this book? Because then that would help her remember like what happened in the last book. So it's just, like I said, even if I'm not writing a review for my blog, like I'm still taking the notes. I just can't not do it.
Crystal is my cliff note. So I suggest everybody get a reading buddy, especially if they've got a really good brain and can remember details, because she will pull out details from like 3 books down in the series and will help you remember. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. She's like, well, she also likes to reread books. I don't have time for that. So I'll let her reread it and then remind me of what was happening and then start fresh.
I need a Crystal because I'm so bad with names. I like the book that I'm reading right now, like right now.
You're
Can't
like, I
remember the
don't know.
names.
No,
Nope.
that's me. That's me. And she will
No, I
sometimes
really
just
can't
play
think of their
games.
names though.
I
was
can
being
because it's a
funny,
series.
but,
That's
like,
the only way.
They're gone. I
I've
have no idea what their names
gone.
are.
And because I'm a visual person, and so it's different with audio. So like if you were to write 5 names and say who's the main character, I could probably point to it. But if you said the names, I might not remember.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Crystal, you had something about your preset.
And it really, it's all of these. I do all of these depending on my day. And if you read my reviews, I really think I need like 5 or 6 different review names because none of I'm trying to find an identity. The preset list of questions is actually something when we did for the Funkin' Fiction blog, that is kind of how I started it.
True.
To straighten, kind of get like an idea of when I was writing, like how to organize things. And it wasn't really necessarily questions. It was just like, okay, what were your initial thoughts? Like either from, what you anticipated about the book or what you saw when you saw
From
the
the cover.
Like what were you going into? And then, what did you like? What did you love? What didn't you like? And I always found it intriguing that, what you didn't like doesn't have to be negative. Sometimes it'd be something like, I love this author and I love this, but it also drove me crazy, like this, this part of the book. And so being able to kind of think about something like that was fun, and having that expectation made me always look for something. So somebody didn't read my book and go, she loved everything. I'd be like, I loved this, but at the same time, like this kid was going off the rails a lot. Like somebody needed to like parent her. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was kind of fun to make those comments. And then I think, like, I don't remember the last question, but it was just nice to have that kind of structure for a while there. And when I think this answers one of your later questions, when I wasn't sure what to write, that's what I would kind of return to, like, okay, what did I like? What did I love? What didn't I like? And it would help bring some of that stuff out.
We use the same basic structure for all of our reviews. Like I said, I have 8 people who write for me, and so everybody has a slightly different style and a different approach and different, sort of language they use to express themselves. But generally, all of our reviews start with an overview of the book, because we don't reprint the blurbs. We summarize, or not the book report summarize, but sort of provide an overview of what the story is and what the conflict is, and sort of leading up there. So all of our reviews start that way and then lead into the analysis portion. So they're not physically separated, with a divider or whatever, but always at the top of our reviews, we explain what the book is about, and here's the basic overview, and here's the conflict, and of course not revealing the end of the book, but sort of the setup, and then they have the health scare and what will happen, kind of thing. And then, I talk to my reviewers about, thinking about things like, what's the character development like? What's the world building like? What's the writing like? Maybe a wonderful book that has so many grammar and writing issues that it makes it very difficult to sort of enjoy or read. What's the plot flow? Do things make sense? Or a lot of logical logical inconsistencies. So we sort of have trigger things that I give them when they come on board, and sort of say, here are things to think about. And maybe every book you don't have to talk about character development, because maybe it's just fine and there's nothing really to say, but having that sort of ideas can help figure out, things to throw into each individual review, or which things might pop for that particular book as something that's either really great or really mad that you want to incorporate.
Right. You might, out of that 10 or 15 list, you pick 2 or 3, and then there you go. There's your review.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So now this next part is about your reading and writing review experiences. So the first question I have is, do you review every book you read, and why or why not?
I do, because it's just, again, it's now become part of my reading process. It's not even a review process. It's just part of my reading process. I just physically, it hurts me if I don't. I just can't do it. I just can't do it.
So when I was reviewing, I didn't. And part of that was because I like to sit down and write the review, like right after I finished reading. The job I was working at the time, I was driving a lot, so I was listening to a lot of audiobooks. So sometimes I would start the next audiobook before I had a chance to get home and write the review for the first one. And I was always afraid that was gonna, like, my listening experience was gonna cross over, like intermingle, I guess. So I tended to only review either ebooks or physical books that I read at the time, and usually newer books that I received as ARCs or books that came out relatively recently.
I was just gonna say, I try to, because of the authors, for the authors, I try to get something on Goodreads every single time I read a book, if I finish it. If I don't finish it, it's not even always because the book's not good. It's just sometimes I was reading 8 books at one time and that one just kind of got lost in the mix. So I know. So I just don't go back to that. But as far as for Instagram, I tend to, like I said, I want to be that kind of advertisement for like the good books. So somebody scrolls past it, it's like, oh, I've never heard of that author. I've never heard of that book. So I try to keep those to be those ones that are kind of newer for the most part, unless it's Coastal Magic, but newer and ones that really were exciting or fun to me, that it's easy to kind of try to pull people in to it.
I review pretty much everything I read, mostly because virtually everything I read ends up being a book that I'm reading specifically for review. I am lucky enough to sort of have an embarrassment of riches of books offered, and there are more books that I could ever read that I want to get my hands on. So most of the reading that I do is a book that I pick up that has been given to me specifically for the purposes of review. And our general blog policy is that if you start a book for the purposes of review, you review it, bottom line. We do some DNFs, do not finish, if sometimes we get into a book and it's just not working for whatever reason. Sometimes it's not even anything terrible about the book. I DNF'd a book because I had COVID and was coughing and realized the book was about like the end of the world dystopian due to a plague. And it was just way, way too triggering for me to read at the time, and I DNF'd it. So it's not always necessarily a negative, but our policy is whether the book gives a 5-star or a 1-star, once you pick it up for review and you start reading it and finish it, that it always gets reviewed, because we feel, like I said, very strongly that our reviews are for our readers. And if we don't like it, I still feel like they deserve to know and know why, and then they can make their own decisions about whether they want to read it. So for me, I would say 99.9% of what I read ends up getting reviewed, and everything that my reviewers take to read for review from the blog, as opposed to their personal reading, also gets up on the blog.
And I would agree with the DNF reviews. I don't do it that often because generally I pick up books that I want to read, whether it's review or for my personal taste. But I think the DNF reviews are equally as important, because like, for example, I DNF'd a book because it was just like there was too much violence in it, and for me, and at that time it was just way too much, and I said other people may enjoy the story, but this is why I didn't. And that's just it. It's like there's reasons I don't finish a book, but that doesn't mean that other people won't think it's the best book that's ever been written. So
Definitely.
I think they're equally as important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if somebody's at home sick with COVID, trying to find a book to read, maybe they're going to see Jay's review of that book and be like, oh, well, I don't want to read about a plague right now either.
Right.
So they're going to pass on that book rather than picking it up and being angry.
Or maybe even saying, you know what, right now I don't want to read it, but in 3 months, I remembered that book and I saw that review, and now it's popping up on my Amazon page and reminds me that I want to read it. So, that exposure can be great no matter what the review is.
Okay, so all of your pre-review habits are done. You have read the book. Now you're ready to sit down and write. Where do you start?
In the beginning.
I mean, I think it comes back to the things that we've been saying in terms of, what are those sort of questions that you want to answer? What are those prompts that you want to hit? For me, I try to, like I said, review almost as soon as I can. I try to review within the day, ideally before I start another book, just because I think it sort of helps me to have a clean, sort of mind that's not cluttered with other books or other things that I'm reading. But I think for me, like once I get started, especially because we do setup first, so it sort of gets me in the mindset where I'm basically doing a factual summary. It's not, I don't have to put any of my feelings into it. I'm giving an overview. This is what happens, first this, and then by the time that sort of gets me flowing, so that then when I've explained it, then I'm like, yeah, and now I want to tell you about, all the things that I'm excited about or things that I thought about it. So I think that helps sort of like lead in and get the review rolling before I get into what I think is the harder part, which is the, analysis part.
So it's interesting because I also start all of my reviews with a brief spoiler-free synopsis
Mhm.
of the book. And over the years, I've struggled with this because a lot of people are like, especially because my reviews are long, they tend to be longer. It's like, well, you could just cut that out, because I put the blurb in, but I put it at the very end. I start with the review and then the blurb comes later. And for me, I feel like if you go into just reading a thing that says, well, I like this character and they did this and this, without knowing who these characters are
Mhm.
or what their conflict is or why we're even reading them, to me, it just seems wrong. So generally, I start writing my review with that spoiler-free synopsis for that same reason Jay mentioned. It kind of puts you in the mindset of, okay, here's what's going to happen with this book. Because I take notes when I'm reading, sometimes I really have the review pretty much written, and I just kind of have to shuffle the pieces around and change
All like in there,
massages
you
a
have to
little
get it
bit.
out.
Right, because it's all in my notes. Sometimes it's not, and sometimes I have to like really think about, like, go back and read the notes and say, okay, oh yeah, this is what I liked. But that tends to help, is get me started, is by writing that brief synopsis. And I would say, even if you don't include it in your review, that could be a good way to get
Mhm.
the thought going.
And just because you both mentioned it, can you describe the difference between the brief synopsis and a book report? Because I know we've all
Mhm.
seen those book report reviews, which have their place. They definitely do. There are times when I'm like, wait a minute, I need to recap for the next book, and I intentionally go looking
Right.
for those
Yeah.
book report
Oh, yeah.
reviews.
Right.
But they are book reports.
Love those people.
Yeah, they're
For
book
that one
reports.
rare time.
Yeah.
Summarizing the book from beginning to end is a book report. It's, I want to know everything that happened and I'm giving a conclusion. For us, I think it's setting up the book, giving people a sense of what it's about and bringing them to the point of conflict, because every romance book, this is a genre reading, there's not genre writing, so there's always a point of conflict. Somebody's sick, somebody's not sure that they want a relationship, whatever, bad guys are coming to shoot our house apart, there's always something. And I think getting them to that point so they understand the setup and where that conflict is, but not explaining how the conference resolved. You don't want to say, and then he miraculously survives or whatever. You want to get them right there. So I think for me, that's the difference, is providing that background and that setup, but not going past that to the resolution.
Gotcha.
So I was gonna actually mention the synopsis, because one of the first notes I wrote when we were like, people were like, they took notes for tonight. I was like, I had to write something down. Was that I generally aim, like, even for Coastal Magic reviews, if I'm unsure how to do my 3 sentences for a book, I typically just do a synopsis, but I do it in my own words, and I summarize the main characters with the wording that I liked about them, what I took away from the book about them, so and so, and he's a doctor with he's really loyal, and this kind of stuff. I'll mention that, and then I'll do the same thing with the female, and then I'll touch on the plot, and then sometimes the setting, because this setting is a big part of the book. Is it in a city? Is it a small town? Is it a city with a small town feel? Is it, is there a big wide cast of characters? Because to me, like, I know, for example, Amber, I can read a book and go, you're not going to like this. There's like literally 2 characters on every page of this book for like chapters. So I want to make sure people like her see, hey, it's really just these 2 main characters. Like, they're great, they're wonderful, but if you like a cast of characters, probably not for you. So my synopsis really is just commenting on characters, setting, and plot as brief as I can, in a way that shows what I took from it. What did I enjoy? They're loyal, they do a lot of stuff for each other, things like that, to just get somebody who that's what they might be in the mood for.
Right.
I think of it as introducing the characters to the people who are reading the review. It's in my own version of the back cover blurb is basically what it is.
That's what I wrote. Light for me, it's for what I learned a long time ago, is if I didn't give a little something, then I would read my review and go, later, that told me nothing. Like,
right, exactly.
What was the
yeah.
character's name? They were a doctor.
Yes,
Like, what?
yes.
So now I've started adding a little bit of that for me sometimes. So when I go back and read that quick refresh, I'm like, oh, that's what the book was about. So yeah, it's my little blurb in my words.
So when I was writing a review for my blog, the book blurb was at the top, So I tended to totally skip the whole summary. Or if I included a summary, it would be like one sentence, you know,
Mhm.
Chris and Joey live in small town America, and they meet at a coffee shop. Like that, maybe that would be where I start and be like, you know, the coffee shop had this really cool vibe to it and whatever. And then basically just start putting words down on the page that I would tell a friend if I was trying to convince them to read the book, if it was a book I really liked. Or say, hey, you might not like it because, and that's kind of where I would start with the reviews, trying to get words on the page.
Well, I think we already covered a little bit of it, but my next question is, how do you handle a review when you don't know what to say? Whether it be a writer's block issue or whether it's a book you didn't like, but you still want to say something about it. How do you work through that?
So that's the one time that I would make the thing that I just said a lie and start with a summary. I would just write a summary of the book. Because usually by the time, and even I would sometimes do like almost a book report, not quite as long, you know, just do maybe 5 or 6 sentences. Because usually as I'm writing there, I'll get to like sentence 3 and be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. That really pissed me off. And give me something to work with.
To jump from.
Honestly, I think some of the hardest reviews to write are the ones that you just absolutely love, because you just want to be like, this is so great, you know, and you just love it so much. But if it's a series, if it's in a series, sometimes I'll go back and read the review from the previous book to kind of, okay, oh, that's really what I liked about these characters, or that kind of thing. Writing the synopsis helps a lot. And then other times just write down, like you talked about that emotional outpouring or whatever. Sometimes I'll just write garbage and then come back the next day and start to pull it apart.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
For people who might be writing Coastal Magic reviews or authors and you're feeling kind of stuck, sometimes just reading a few others, a little cute few clips to just see things like, oh yeah, I could comment on that, or I could talk about that setting, or that's true. You know, I like that, or yeah, I didn't like that either, because you're trying to, if you're exactly kind of narrow your focus so that you're just another voice saying some of those things for the people who might feel the same way to read it. Because again, yeah, that one review said that, hey, I felt that way too. I just forgot, you know, let me go ahead and say that so somebody else sees that and either goes towards the book or doesn't, you know, whatever.
And you can certainly like change it up, say it in your own words, you know,
but just to get some kind
get
of
it working,
jostle it around.
Yeah, something that I do is specifically that as well. I will have read it, I will have my feelings, but if it's a book that's like really popular that has a lot of reviews, I'll read the 1s and the 2s, and I'll read the 5s, and I'll see if there's a common thread of things that what everybody's saying. And if it's something that I am agreeing with or disagreeing with, I don't necessarily want to add another one. I'll say, hey, I agree with all of these reviews that say this. So I won't spend a lot of time. I'll just say, hey, I agree with those, but I disagree on this, and this is why. So I kind of do that as well. Not all the time, but I do kind of, to give me a little bit of balance. So I'm not writing, you know, 15 paragraphs of stuff that everybody else has already said.
I think Jen had said that she thinks that the books you love are the hardest to review. And I think actually it's the books in the middle for me that are the hardest reviews. The books that I love, I feel like sometimes it's hard to rein myself in because I just want to like, and I love this and I love this and this was amazing. And you know that, and then when books that I really am not happy with, I find like I'm fired up and like want to explain like why this pissed me off so much. But like the books that are sort of like, it was good, I enjoyed it,
it was fine,
those I find are the hardest. And I do think, going back to some of the things that we've been talking about, is maybe you have your list of potential things to talk about. Like maybe you can start writing, make that list and just stick it off to the side. And then you can refer back. Okay, you know, characters, plot, world building, whatever those things are, looking at that and saying, all right, you know, I'm going to pick a couple of these to talk about, or maybe even just looking at that list will spark something in you. to sort of help get started if you don't even know what to talk about or you don't feel. We also, in general, try to always start the review with something that's positive, even if it's a negative review overall, or what somebody would consider a negative review. So, it's sort of the synopsis or the lead in to set up, and then, the things that we liked, and maybe it's very small, and then the things that were problematic. So most of our reviews sort of follow that. Even for a great review, there's often things that are just, this is a
Not
little
quite
nitpick,
right.
but this didn't make
Yep.
sense at the end, and I feel like someone forgot to make sure that he wasn't actually in this room when that happened, and now he knows about it, or whatever it is. But I think that also helps if you sort of say, all right, let me just think of like one thing that I really liked that I want to talk about and get that out there. But I think, again, once you sort of start writing, that it helps the flow come out.
Right.
Sometimes what I would do if I was stuck on like one of those 3-star reviews that you were like, it was fine,
Mhm.
would be to look back at the cover and
Mhm.
see if, like, what I felt, if the cover matched the book.
Mhm. That's a good one.
Because that at least gives you a talking point. Because I know we've all read
Great
those
idea.
books where you're like, this cover doesn't make a damn bit of sense. What is happening?
Right.
Drives
or-
me nuts.
Yeah.
Or you look at it after finishing and go, oh, that's really clever.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
so that at least gives
That's
you
a good
something to
point.
start
Yeah.
with.
Mhm.
I like that. That's
Well,
cool.
Funkin' Fiction is my sister's blog, Jennifer, who runs the Coastal Magic Convention. And that's kind of what Amber and Crystal were talking about earlier about Jennifer's presets. She's got a whole preset format. And one is basically, you looked at the cover, you looked at the blurb, expectation. Based on that, how did the book, did it meet your
Fair.
expectations?
deliver what
based on
promise.
those clues?
And that does help me look at books now, just when I look at what books I want to pick up. That doing it in that format and that question in particular really does make me look at books, and you're not just reading, you're actually thinking about what you're going to read, and and that has helped. It's changed the process of how I may read a book now or pick up a book.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's important because, I see this sometimes in even just things that my reviewers read, but they'll say, based on the blurb, it was billed as, sort of high action suspense, but when I read it, it really wasn't. And maybe it was still amazing, but if you're reading the blurb and you're picking up this book because this is what you think you're getting, I just want to make sure that's not what you're getting. And it's not always a
Right.
bad thing, but I do think that that's a great point about, what your expectations are, and does the book meet the expectations that sort of set out in the cover and the blurb, or, does it go a different direction?
And that's another great point for why to review, even if, it wasn't your type of book, but to include the review anyway, because it's a way for people to manage expectations.
Mhm.
People get ideas based on what they're seeing and what they're reading before they ever read the book. And
Mhm.
this is a way to help.
And I think that's so true, especially of the romance genre, because it's not romance unless it has an HEA or an HFN.
Mhm.
I will stand by that till I die.
I agree.
And if I read a book that's billed as a romance and it does not, I make sure everybody knows, because I'll say like, this is women's fiction, or this is, this with romantic elements, but it is not a romance genre. And
Mhm.
whether that's spoilish or not, because I'm kind of giving away the ending, I think that if you go into a romance expecting a genre romance book and you don't have that, you need to know.
Mhm.
And
I
that's
can't
the one-
believe that that's still a conversation.
Oh my
I saw,
God, it is.
I mean, I know it is. I saw, and I don't know what the book was, so you can't ask me, but I saw somebody talking about a book that was billed as a romantic comedy where somebody died at the end. That is not either of those things. That's
I
not
thought Romeo
how
and
that
Juliet
works.
was super funny too.
Yes. Yes, the Notebook.
I think that's
Spoiler.
any genre. I mean, if you're reading a murder mystery and they don't solve it at the end,
Right.
That's a good
That's-
point. Yeah.
then
Then it's not a book, a concluded mystery.
exactly.
It's a to be continued.
Exactly. So, okay. So the next one is something that I have found doing the reading challenge is something I hear all the time. So some people feel pressure to come up with the right words to express themselves, or they are worried about, you know, somebody reading it and it being too personal, or, you know, there's a lot of pressure. So do you ever feel pressure from an author reading what you wrote, or other readers reading what you write? Do you feel pressure? And if you do, how do you deal with that?
I'll say my response is not anymore. I mean, I've been doing this for over 13 years. And I felt in the beginning, it was like you wanted to get more readers and you wanted to get more books. So you had to kind of feel this weight of making sure that you had it perfect. But the bottom line is that I write reviews first and foremost for myself, and secondly for other readers. And so I think as long as you are true to yourself as far as the words you put down, no matter what the format is, you know, then you just have to learn to let it go. And I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, it took me probably a good 4 or 5 years to just completely be like, I don't care anymore. I'm going to write these reviews the way I want to write them. I don't write reviews that are controversial because I'm not a confrontational type person. I try to be, you know, like what Jay said, I always, even if I don't like the book, I'm going to try to always put something positive in it. And then I'm going to talk about the negatives, but I'm going to do it respectfully. And I'm never going to attack the author. I'm not going to attack the subject matter, other than I may say this subject matter was not for me, but I'm not going to be a judge and jury. It's just, do I like it or I don't like it? And so I think for people who might say like, it's hard to write reviews because I'm worried about what X, Y, or Z will think of it, try to be true to yourself, and hopefully you can figure out to release that weight. Because bottom line is you're doing this because you love to read. Just put it out there.
I'm gonna say, I think that's actually a sort of a two-part or two different questions in my head of, you know, putting yourself out there. I think obviously there's some level of vulnerability and personal exposure that comes from sharing your thoughts on a book. I mean, there is a sort of level of intimacy there in terms of what you're putting out in the world. And I think everybody has to sort of find that level that they're comfortable with. I mean, anybody who's read any of my reviews knows exactly what I think is hot and what I don't think is hot. And that's not something that I like discuss with real people that I randomly meet at the grocery store, but like my readers are like, oh yeah, she's gonna like that. So obviously there is some level of exposure. And my dad was like, oh, wow, you're, you know, whatever on Goodreads our ranking is, I'd love to read some of your reviews. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, you're not going to read this review. Like, what is the tamest thing I can find that that I can tell him? So I think, that's a piece of figuring out sort of how much of yourself do you want to expose? What do you want to talk about from how a book affects you personally versus sort of a more removed? And I think there are levels of that, and everyone can decide sort of how they fall. The other piece I think is how do you feel about other people's reactions and what they might say? And I think in general, when we say other people, we're talking about, authors or a publisher or a publicist or somebody who may have given you the book or be connected to the book in some way. And I think in what we try to come back to over and over again is who our audience is. And for me, I feel really strongly that our audience is readers. And I feel like I'm doing them a disservice if there's something that I am not sharing because I'm more worried about how the author is going to feel than I am about my readers. And I find that if I think about that in terms of somebody who is spending their hard-earned money on this book, and they deserve to have my honest truth and not have me hiding something because I'm afraid it will upset, it will upset the author, that someone will be mad. But I will say that we do sort of have a general policy that if you pick up a book, or you cannot pick up a book if you don't feel 100% comfortable that you can give it an honest review. And especially in LGBTQ romance, it's a very small community. When I started reviewing 11 years ago, it was like super tiny. Everyone knew each other. It's almost impossible to do this and not know the authors, not know the publishers, not know, just over time you get to know people personally. And there are people who I won't read their books because I know that I couldn't write a negative review. And then I have other friends who I know would never care at all. And I feel completely comfortable. So I think setting that sort of threshold for yourself. I mean, there's authors I just know I can't read because I know I can't, if I hated the book, I would never feel comfortable saying it. And so that's my line in the sand. I don't review them. So I think that also helps. What'd you say?
I said I won't review friends' books for that
And
very
see, and I have
reason.
friends who I review their books all the time and I don't have a problem because I know if I didn't like it and I said I didn't like it, they could separate that from our friendship. And then I have other ones where I feel like, no, I just don't think I could do it. So I think everyone has their sort of line of what they're comfortable
Yep.
with.
Yeah, and for somebody who's like just thinking about getting started writing reviews and you're nervous about it, it's okay to only post reviews for books that you like.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you know, we've talked about it's important to post reviews for books that you don't like, but to get started,
Yes.
it is totally okay to do that. And it's totally okay to do that for the rest of your reviewing career too. Like
Review whatever you like.
review how you want to.
Exactly. That's a great
agree.
point.
Right, because not every person who leaves a review is also blogging, you
Yeah.
know, to the audience that you folks
Completely
are.
agree.
Yeah, it's a Goodreads review. It's a, hey, on Facebook, I really like this book. You should check it out. It had funny characters.
Yes.
Done.
Mhm.
That's
Agree.
considered a review.
Mhm.
You know,
Tie all of that
Mhm.
kind of together, like the vulnerability, and then you can leave positive reviews. I think what we need to realize as reviewers and readers is that we're building a reading community. And when you do expose things about yourself, these people that, especially this goes to the whole social media thing, you are creating friendships and people who may then follow you. And then what do you like? And you've got this whole, just this whole different safe space in a way. Like, you know, these are my people, like these are the people that like. So I think like taking those chances and starting to do that and starting to get comfortable in reading other reviews, you never know where that may just lead as far as friendships you can make even through Goodreads. You know, people who follow your reviews. I have people on that I follow reviews on. I have no idea who they are, but I mean, they put up something and they're like, I'm like, they don't usually get 5 stars. They get 5 stars to that. Let me go check that out for a minute and see if it's any good. So I think like, you know, you just don't know. You never know when you take that risk where it could lead. And so you start off small and, you know.
the next one is spoilers. How do you handle spoilers?
If I feel like it's something that people would definitely want to know, or if I feel like I can't explain what I liked or disliked without mentioning it, we'll put it behind a spoiler tag. So sometimes I feel like it's hard to leave it out completely because like then this whole topic that I want to talk about, you can't talk about without, and I'm sure that there are people who skip over it, and then there are people who don't care about spoilers at all and will click and expand it and see it. So we do include spoilers, but always behind a tag.
We avoid them usually at all costs.
Yeah.
When we do an official sisters reviewing books, we just usually skip past it.
It's very
I
hard if
have-
you're doing a, you know, Instagram or an audio, because then there's no way to really hide it.
You're trying to say, yeah, you're trying to say everything without saying anything because you want to draw people in. Amber said we avoid it, and we do, but I still remember when I did a post one time and I made my graphic and everything, and I just stressed out for so long afterwards. Like, did I spoil that? Because it was just talking cats. Okay, guys, it was not a major part of the plot, but that's what
there
made
are
me
some
wanna read
people
it.
that really would get
And it-
upset to know that there were talking cats. I know because I've read the reviews of people like, you know, I wish I hadn't read the review about the talking cat. It's weird. I
Well,
don't know.
Yeah.
But then the author was like talking one time and she mentioned it. And I was like, well, if she can just say it, then I can mention it. And it wasn't like pivotal to the plot or anything, but to me as a reader, like if you told me there were talking cats, that book would have made it to the top of my list. I was like, well, I'll read that one next. So but I do think we try to avoid especially anything specific to the plot. And that's why I kind of read that blurb, you know, over and over and over again, to make sure I'm not, you know, sharing that big reveal in any way.
That's a good point that you said about something, but when you said something about the author, it just reminded me. Sometimes I will reach out to the author and ask them whether they consider something a spoiler. Because sometimes the whole book will rest on something that will be very difficult to talk about it at all. Sometimes if like authors will say like, I don't want anybody to talk about this the first month, and after that everyone already knows anyway, so feel free. So if I have a personal relationship with an author that I know them well enough that I feel comfortable, sometimes I will just ask them, you know, do you think of this as a spoiler? And I find I'm much more conservative often than the authors are, but that's also, you know, sort of an option, is to get a feel for what they think. And like what we said before, I feel like if it's in the blurb, it's fair game.
used to try on my blog like a hide the spoiler, but I found that when it goes to if it goes to a feed, it expands it automatically. So because that was happening, and I don't do them often, I now just like literally like in big bold font, beware spoilers, like dot, and like put stars on both sides, and then I'll write the little bit, and then I'll put like spoilers over. That way it's not hidden, but like if you see it, you can stop and then jump down. But I try to avoid spoilers at all costs, except when it is so critical to why I rated a book or a certain way. There have been a few times that I can think of where it's like, I either really liked the book until this happened, or the book wasn't doing it that great for me, but then this happened. And without saying specifically what it is, it was like just me talking about, oh yeah, it wasn't meaningful. It wasn't a meaningful review. So
sometimes I would put, like in that instance, like if there was something that happened, I would say it happened at page whatever, or percent whatever. I really wasn't liking this book until I got to about the 60% mark. So that way people could be like, oh, okay, well, you have to read like half the book before it really like picks up and gets going. And I'll explain, like, it was slow world building up until about 60%. And by that point, you have enough information for like a big event to happen, and try to be super vague about it, but let people know about what point that it either
I do
picked up
that.
or that it lost me.
I'll say like, until like the 50% mark, this was like this. But there have been a couple of cases that I had to put a spoiler in because I just felt like so strongly that and honestly, it wasn't changing it for better. It was always changing it for worse.
I was always more willing to spoil books that I didn't like than the ones that I did.
Yeah. A couple of them were DNFs, and that was the reason I didn't finish it. And so it's like, but
yeah, I think if you're posting a DNF review, it's important to say exactly why you DNF'd.
Yeah.
Okay. How has social media changed the review landscape?
Having been doing this for quite a while, people by and large read good old blogs. And back in the day, authors had like joint blogs where like 4 or 5 authors would each take a day and they would post, and it was blogging was very active. Social media has given new people a way to express their feelings about books in new and exciting ways. I'm old and I'm ornery and I don't do those things, but that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate them and think that they have a very valuable place in the book reviewing community.
Amber and Crystal, you do the Bookstagram.
So I probably read blogs, I've been doing this so I've read them at some point in my life. But guys, I don't even watch the news. Like I seriously, people tell me things and I'm like, wait, what? Wait, explain that more. Come back here. My students are like, my husband's like, where have you been? I'm like, I don't know. So I scroll when I have a few minutes here or there. I mean, I try not to do that as much as I do, but I do. And so I can't even get to a bookstore. Like I get super excited when I walk into a Barnes and Noble. Like it's like, oh my gosh, I have an hour. Like, let's go do it. So to me, Instagram and social media has become basically the equivalent of walking around a bookstore.
That's a good point.
It's
I like
just
that.
That's why I like the visuals. I like to see the books. I like to see the quick little videos. They turn it into like almost little like trailers for books. You get and you're kind of like, you're brought in and I'm like, oh, I want to read that book. Like, oh, wait, you stopped. Why did you stop? I need more. So I feel like social media has become that, like I said, just, bookstores aren't a thing. And, you can cruise covers, but almost just a little bit more interactive. You can chat with other people. You can share what oh, I've read that. That's awesome. You can't do that in a bookstore. Like you're like, you see the book and you're like, I read this. Like, this is good. But you can do it online. So I think it's just that next level of bringing that interaction to it. And what I think we all somewhat crave, maybe not everybody, but as a reader, I want to talk about these books. And so, yes, you go to blogs, but now I can talk with people, we can get really excited about, a part or something we like. So I think that's what social media has started to do is made it like almost going to a bookstore without, getting in my car and going to the
I love it. That's great.
Okay, so then my last one is, do you change your review style based on format?
We have
Yeah.
an audio format where basically the review is probably 90% the same. So the sort of setup, the analysis, but there's always a section at the end where we talk about specific things specific to audio. So if you were interested in reading the ebook version, most of the review would still be relevant to you regardless of which format. But we talk about the narration, the pacing, the tone, the character voices. Is it consistent from one book to the next? Can you tell which main character is talking? I mean, we do LGBTQ romance, which means that often there's like 2 or more male characters. There's often like assortments of male friends, and you can have 15 male voices in one audiobook that all need to be different. And so we do talk about that as well. Can you distinguish between them? So we always have a section that's specifically targeted about the audio itself. And we do give a book rating and an audio rating as 2 separate ratings for our audio reviews. Otherwise, there's just one overall rating.
Yeah, that's 100%. I agree. If you're specifically reviewing an audio book, you need to address the narration, because it's a separate part that works together with the story. Hopefully, I have had situations where the narration's been horrible and it's kind of ruined the experience, or that there's been a really good narrator and I've been able to finish a story because otherwise I wouldn't have, but I really like the narration. It's a different experience. There's several authors that I actually will review the ebook and the audiobook, and they're 2 different reviews. But I, just like Jay, the 90% of the review is the same because it's talking about the story. But then you call out a section that's on the narration. I address usually the point of view, because you don't maybe notice it as much in a print story. But in narration, it's very critical if it's alternating point of view. Is it 2 different narrators?
Yes.
Is it a full
How
cast?
do they work
Is it one
together?
narrator? How do they work together? I've had situations where like the female narrator and the male narrator are at different speeds, and they just don't mesh well together, and that's annoying. And so that's important. And all the other points that Jay made, it's very important. So if you're out there and you're listening to audiobooks and you want to put a review, again, even if you do just the short reviews, call out the narration separately, write a sentence or 2 about the narration, give the narration a separate rating, independent of the story.
Right.
Because there's some audiobook listeners, they will find a really good narrator and then they'll just listen to all of the books that narrator has worked on. So they're not necessarily following the author or a series, they're following a narrator. So it's important to include that information. Like, this wasn't one of his best books. Like, he maybe wasn't feeling well or something. Like, you could tell he had a cold. Like, I've listened to books where you could tell, like, you get to a chapter and you're like, they were sick that day. So, and it does, I mean, it sucks. It's part of the human experience, but it does kind of sometimes detract from the listening experience.
There's also the opposite of that. I just listened to an audiobook of a guy that's been doing audiobooks forever, and he's done great work. I just listened to an audiobook that he did. Great book, great narration, probably the best book I have listened to from him. And then he commented under my Facebook post, and I was like, oh my God.
Isn't that the best? I love it when so he, like an author, again, we're not writing the reviews for authors, but if an author takes the time to read your review and then thanks you for it, or uses like a blurb in their book or on their website, and it's just like, oh, but again, that's not the reason I do it.
Right.
And then I was saying we could also add on how Alexa reads it, because the last book I was reading, it might have been nice for somebody to know that Jesus was said Jesus. So it made for a very interesting book.
Wow.
Jesus was calling and Jesus. And I won't even tell you how she referred to a female part.
So
it was said
that's a good, I was gonna say that's a good point. So if you do speech or a text to speech, that's not the same thing as an audiobook. And so in that case, you wouldn't need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It just
that's
might
a
have
really
been
good
nice to
point.
know if somebody said, hey, when you read this book,
Yeah,
90% of the time, now you're going to read Jesus as Jesus for the rest of your
Right.
life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely an antidote that you can mention in your review for sure. But
Yeah,
like
definitely.
Jen said, it doesn't need to be its own separate section in that case.
Yeah.
I
It's just
wouldn't.
something funny.
Okay, so to wrap up, I'd like to ask if anyone else, because we've covered a lot of ground tonight. Thank you, ladies, for hanging out and doing that. I want to make sure that aside from the conversations we've already had, is there anything else? Tips, tricks, advice, encouragement for anyone who is looking to write their first review? And again, for their own personal use, not that they're starting a blog or going to be a book talker on TikTok tomorrow.
I just wanted something that I will do on those quick BookBub reviews or Goodreads, especially if you're not sure where to start with, is to let other readers know, what the highlights are. Is, if you like a second chance romance book, if you like a small town, if you like, you can pull out those key elements. If you like books similar to, and throw out another author that you really like that equates to it. Those are just, quick things to help other readers quickly go through those reviews, and maybe one of those key things will resonate with them, like, oh, I love small town, I've got to read Small Town Witches right now. So
Yes.
that's a
Oh, I
tip.
definitely agree with that. I try to do that a lot, sort of, if this is something that you're interested, you're really going to love this, or this is great for fans of whatever. So I completely agree with you.
I always had a hard time with comps. So I
Me
tried
too.
to never do the comps because I would immediately forget titles of books. Like, oh, this reminds me of that book I read last year that had, a similar theme. What the hell was that called?
Call up your
Yeah,
book buddy, and then you let her tell you.
Right, exactly. Crystal, I'm going to be messaging
Yeah.
you.
Right.
You gotta read the
I-
same
yeah,
books as her. She'll be, she'll remember.
I wish I did better with tags, like that kind of thing, like the second chance or enemies to lovers or small. I am horrible with that, and I that's something I wish I was better at.
Oh yeah,
So
we
I would
tag
always try
everything.
and write like just a couple sentences if I was explaining to a friend. And again, when I started writing book reviews for books I already liked. So I would explain in 3 sentences to a friend why I think they should read it. And that's a place to start.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, start off and just have fun with it, because you'll kind of surprise yourself as you learn things. Like, I still think Amber probably is just tickled by, I was like, I learned a new word, world building.
Oh yes, we had fun with
World
world building. We were like, this is world building. I remember sitting around in like these group chats and thinking, like, did I miss a class? Everybody's talking about world building. I had no freaking idea what they're talking about. I did know, but I never, thought of it in like one term, word building.
Yeah.
So
So when you
yeah,
start trying to write those reviews, you start learning things, you start looking for those words. Like, how do I explain this? How do I do this? And I think it's just fun to see how much that evolves and how much more comfortable
That's awesome.
you will be to just how easy you can write 3 sentences. And you'll be like, okay, no more than that. I'm good. I just need 3.
sometimes it's really hard.
I was just gonna say my parting advice would be there's no right or wrong way to write a review.
Exactly.
Absolutely. You can, and if you haven't tried, go on Goodreads, go on any of our sites, go on Amazon, go on BookBub, just, read some reviews, see what you like about them, what you don't like about them, and then take what you like and make it your own.
Absolutely.
I was going to add one caveat to that is keep your review about the book. Never bring the author into it.
Yes.
Good idea. Yeah.
One caveat. That's it.
Yeah.
Everything
No, I
else
agree.
is fair game.
Yeah.
Something I kind of live by, just real quick, something I live by is you might not like the book, but that doesn't mean that somebody out there might not like that book. I mean, I think it takes incredible talent to even write a book. So I'm appreciative, even if it might not have been my thing, unless it was just completely offensive, which has rarely ever happened. So when that review, be cognizant of it. It might not have been a book for you, but there's somebody out there that's probably that might like it.
Exactly. Well, ladies, thank you
Can't
all
wait to see
for
you
a
all next month.
wonderful chat. I will be posting the link to everyone's site in the video notes. So everyone take a look and see the blogs that are out there. Jen?
Can you include our socials? That way, if someone if I'm on Facebook and other sites, and that way if someone wants to reach out to me to ask me questions,
Yeah.
they don't have to go through
Perfect.
my blog. They can just find me.
I'll do your main site and then your socials, and then because I think all
Great.
of your stuff, goes a little here and a little there, and then you're more active on one site than the next. So I'll go ahead and include all of that.
Thank you.
So, okie dokie, ladies, thank you all, and I will be seeing you soon.
Can't wait. Thanks.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks.